So our speaker today is Bishop Robert Barron. Many of you already know who he is. He is the auxiliary bishop for the Los Angeles Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and he is our regional bishop here in Santa Barbara region. He is the founder of Word on Fire, as well as the creator of the Catholicism series and the follow-up Catholicism Pivotal Players. And he's going to be here with us today to ask you some questions, because he's going to be going to Rome and speaking with the Pope about vocations and discernment for the young people. So we want to welcome him, as well as our host here, Father Luke Mata, and he is here to interview and question Bishop Barron with your questions and wonderful comments that you've already said. So we want to welcome both of them to the stage right now. If you will all please give them a warm welcome.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Listen, thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm delighted to see you. It always lifts me up, to see especially young people coming together to, understand the faith, to celebrate the faith. And I really wanted this day because, as you heard, I'm going to the Synod. So every 3 years, they have a Synod, which is a gathering of bishops from around the world to consider some important topic in the life of the church. So over the years, we had many different topics. So the Pope decided this year to talk about young people. And a lot of us were just delighted with that choice, because you guys, you're the future of the church, and how we reach out to you, how we engage you is essential, right? So anyway, last November, along with a few others, I was elected as a delegate to go to the Synod. So the bishops' conferences around the world elect delegates, then the Pope chooses some of his own as well. So we're all going to gather next week. It's October 3rd we start, and it'll be a whole month of deliberations every day. I think everyone in the Synod is allowed to give a 4-minute speech. So I haven't written mine yet. I really seriously wanted to hear from you before I do it. So I'll write that next week at some point, and if I'm lucky, I'll be able to give this little 4-minute talk. But then what we do is we break into small groups based on languages, so all the English speakers, Spanish speakers, French speakers, etc. And then we try to process what we've heard. And then finally the Synod produces like a document that's meant to express our views, and it's on youth and vocational discernment. The whole idea of hearing the voice of God and how to respond. So anyway, in preparation for this, in my Word on Fire work, I hear from young people all the time. So I'm on YouTube, and I hear people's comments there. We have podcast shows, and people respond. But I thought, I'd love to hear from my own region. So we decided to organize this event, and again, delighted you came. And the idea really is for me to listen to you today. I could have given a talk to you, but I thought, they don't want to hear me talk. I really want to hear from you what's on your minds and hearts. And listen, under this rubric, that I can literally bring your concerns right to Rome, right to the Vatican, right to the Pope, and say, here's what I'm hearing from young people. So anyway, that was the idea behind today. So we've already culled a number of questions from you. I have not seen any of them. So Father Luke is nice enough to kind of serve as moderator, and just to, introduce these questions. Again, I don't know what they are. And I don't want to so much like give answers to all your questions as though that's going to settle it. It's really for me to hear from you. So I might say a few things in response, but it's more, what's on your minds and hearts, what I'm interested in. Okay? So that's the format for this morning. So with that, maybe Father Luke.
Thank you, Bishop Barron. Really, what an honor, and we're so grateful. I think on behalf of all the young people who are here this morning, we're so grateful to you. We happen to have a regional bishop who is kind of a superstar, and we're so lucky to have you here, really. It's an honor. And yes, a lot of the people here today have a lot of questions. I think there is no way we can go through all of them.
No.
But I selected some of them. A number of them were repeated, so it's good because it gives you an idea of where people are. And here's the first question.
Yeah.
I recently started watching your YouTube videos and your Catholicism series. Both have been helpful in strengthening my faith. I read Orthodoxy and started reading the Summa Theologica because you mentioned them in the video.
Good.
Also, you confirmed me at St. Maximilian Kolbe about 2 years ago.
Good.
Back then, I didn't know who you were, so it is good that I have now the opportunity to be with you. And here's my question. As a freshman at Cal State Northridge, and there isn't a Newman Center on campus, is there anything being done to establish more Newman Centers?
Well, you know, I think the Newman Centers are some of the best places today for engaging young people, and there's been kind of a revival of Newman Centers around the country. You know what I mean? It's Catholic centers, at the especially at the secular universities. Because as you know, I mean, very often people feel under the gun at the secular universities, where religion's often seen as something old-fashioned or old hat or even oppressive. And I found, as I wander around the country, very often these vibrant Newman Centers. I just met a couple of the Focus missionaries are here, right? UCSB has Focus missionaries, and they're doing fantastic work all over the country in engaging college students around the faith. So I believe in these Newman Centers, and I'm delighted to see the revival in them. Glad you mentioned the YouTube videos, the Catholicism series. Maybe some of you have seen those, but what I was trying to do is show the truth of Catholicism, but also the beauty of it. Because I really think that beauty is a way into people's hearts, sometimes more than truth. Do you know what I mean? And we're a beautiful religion. It's a great thing about Catholicism. Think of the arts and architecture and poetry and literature, you know. We've kind of embraced the beautiful. And that actually came up in that document that came out in March, based on what young people had said, that the way of beauty is often a really good way into the faith. And so I'm curious to know if that's true for you guys, that can be an effective way to really engage the mind and heart. But anyway, the Newman Centers, I think, are terrific and really important.
Here's another question. Dear Bishop Barron, thank you for taking the time to give youth a voice. We need one in our parish. And my question is, what do the youth do when there is no place for them in the church after confirmation? How do we encourage parish leadership to hire a youth minister?
Yeah, you know, the Archbishop Gomez has said that's one of his goals, that every single parish have a fully engaged youth minister, and I think that's a very good goal. It's a classic problem, you know, in the Catholic Church, is that a lot of people get confirmed, and then it's like graduation day. It's like, see you later, you know. I tell the guys and gals that I confirm in the region, Pope Francis was talking to a group of confirmation students, and he said, now, remember, this is not the sacrament of arrivederci. You know, it's like, you're not graduating and leaving the church. This is the sacrament of beginning, right? Confirmation is an initiation. But parishes do face that. I mean, how do we re-engage young people? And you guys know that. I mean, it's just a hard age often when people are 17, 18, 19, 20. What gets them involved? I mean, in some ways, please, you tell me. If you had a chance to say to Pope Francis, if he was right here, Your Holiness, here's the way to get 18, 19, 20-year-olds involved, what would you tell him? You tell me. Who's got an idea? I'm Pope Francis. What would you tell me? Go ahead. Come again?
I'd say speak the truth.
So the church speak.
No matter how difficult it is.
So not good. Yeah, good. It's helpful. So not so much trying to compromise or trying to bend over backwards to make it appealing, but to say what the church teaches clearly and strongly would energize and engage young people. Yeah. What else comes to mind? Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Listen.
Yeah. And that's.
For a long time. Listen for a long time.
Yeah. And what am I likely to hear? And I really mean that honestly. So if today we're doing kind of a listening session, and if I were listening 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, what would they say to me? Go ahead.
I know a lot of people, they fall in love with the church because of the traditions of like just seeing how things used to be. Like,
Yeah.
they fall in love with that. Not especially beautiful church architecture, but also beautiful liturgy. So I think if you have those two things
Yeah, and again, that's the way of beauty. Pope Francis says that in one of his encyclicals, the via pulchritudinis, he put it in Latin. Right? The way of beauty is a way into people's hearts. And that can be expressed, right, architecturally, liturgically, if the liturgy is done beautifully. Yeah, good. What else is on your mind? I'm just curious. Go ahead, please. Yeah, she mentioned Eucharistic adoration, and I've always been fascinated by that younger people seem to be drawn to this practice that you wouldn't think. Like, just to sit or kneel for an hour before the Blessed Sacrament, I mean, would a young person find that engaging? My own pet theory is it's because of these machines that we all have, right? And that we're so preoccupied with our technology, and so that we kind of like being able to sit prayerfully for a long period. Curious about that. People respond to Eucharistic adoration? Yeah. Good. In support of the Eucharistic Lord, I appreciate it. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
I think a lot of us do because we know how to do that. We've been taught. But it's not something that comes naturally to a lot of the young people I work with. Oh my gosh, a microphone.
No, that's good. You
Hello.
have good, strong voice. I heard that.
I don't think it's something that comes naturally to a lot of the young people I work with because they haven't been taught how to unplug and how to focus and how to really sit with God.
Mm-hmm. No, you're
be
right.
comfortable with that.
It's a discipline. It's a practice. And like anything else, how do you play golf and how do you play a musical instrument? You got to be brought into that world and trained. And I'm speaking as a bishop. I've been at this for a long time, but when I go on a retreat, honestly, the toughest thing for me is to put this away and put the email away. And it is, because we're like all kind of addicted to it, aren't we? And no, put that away. You don't have to check your email obsessively. You don't have to check your Facebook feed. It's not that important. But we do get addicted to it. And then you got to be trained. What do you do in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament? It's an art and it's a discipline. That's good. Please, go ahead.
Greater access to the sacraments, particularly confession.
Yeah, no, good. I think you all heard that. So greater access to the sacraments. So I wonder if people feel that somehow after confirmation's over, the young people feel, well, I don't know, I'm not being invited into the sacraments. I'm not being availed the opportunity, especially with confession. Yeah, that's helpful. Go ahead, please.
One of the things I've found is where I'm from, there's about 7 or 8 parishes that all have a morning mass around the same time. And if you have school or work, you can't get to it. That's the one mass a day.
Yeah.
For all these parishes, it's a 7 or 8 a.m. mass.
Yeah.
So I guess different times.
Stagger the mass times even. No, it's good. It's a practical suggestion, but a good one. What makes daily mass more available to people? That's important. Please, go ahead.
This goes along with an emphasis on truth and liturgy, but I think there's a common misconception that in order to reach the youth, you have to appeal to them in a certain way.
Yeah.
And as I understand why people do that, but I think I really want the hierarchs of the church to know we don't want to be appealed to with things of our culture and the bad things of our culture. Life is scary and it's hard, and the thing that keeps us going is having a rock solid church and rock solid priests and rock solid orthodox that we can fall back on. So that goes along with the truth that having beautiful music to kind of come and let your soul be soothed, because life is scary and it can be hard, but we really want to have something outside of ourselves that we can depend on objectively. We don't want to say, okay, well, let's try to make this thing that's not so good actually better because that's what you guys like. No. We want something beautiful outside of ourselves that we can depend on without having to question it.
Yeah.
There's a question on that.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for that. And there is a question. The next question is similar to what you were, maybe you wrote it. As a young Catholic alive in 2018, it seems like the church is constantly looking for ways to adjust to our age and our culture. But I live in a culture of death. Why would anybody want to adjust the church to this kind of culture? Why are we trying to renew the church when my path to Christ is exactly the same as it has been for centuries, since the beginning of the church? Why not renew the culture instead of renewing the church?
Yeah, I mean, good. Good. They're searching questions and observations you're making there, and they're classic dilemmas, if you want, in the history of the church. Call it the identity relevance problem, and that goes back to the very beginning. What I mean is there's the identity of the church, so that it's got a structure, it's got a form. There's something eternal about the church, absolutely. And the church is always reaching out to whatever culture it finds itself in, right? So if it remains hyper-stressed on identity, it can lose a sense of connection. When it becomes hyper-stressed on connection, it loses identity, right? So there's the classic way of stating the problem. And watch it up and down the centuries. My hero, St. Thomas Aquinas, in the Middle Ages, used Aristotle, which was the kind of the science of the time, right? And many people thought that was very innovative and very dangerous, but he thought it's the way best to reach out with the integrity of the faith to the culture. So that's the general issue. Now, how do we do that today? You know, is there a way to maintain our identity and our substance and our form and our structure and engage the modern world? That's been a lot of my work, you know, with the YouTube stuff and all that, is try to find points of contact in the culture. I tend to, you know, like in movies or music or books or whatever's going on, to find, is there an analogy anywhere, a point of contact with the faith? So I quite agree. It doesn't mean we abandon the faith or we try to just make it so amorphous that it appeals to anybody. But there's still the outreach, you know, and so trying to find that balance, I think, is key. God knows, I lived through a time, like when I was a kid, younger than you guys, where we were so strong on relevance. I mean, believe me, the church kind of lost its form and its identity. I mean, nobody, least of all me, wants that. But I think there's also that other dynamic. This John Henry Newman said that the church is like an animal in its environment, right? So the animal moves through its environment and it takes in what it can, it resists what it must, otherwise it dies, right? So an animal that is completely open to its environment is called a dead animal, right? It's become its environment. An animal that is completely closed to its environment is also a dead animal. It's not being fed, etc. So there's the church, which is not a thing but an organism, right? It's the mystical body living its way through the world. Anyway, I'm speaking more abstractly, but those are the great principles involved. But I think that's really important to hear that from young people. Don't want a church that's become the world, right? That's become the environment. Well, then ho-hum, who needs it? We'll always be more entertained, you know, by Beyonce and Justin Bieber than anybody playing music in the church. I mean, it's just the way it goes. So if we're just trying to become the culture, forget it. So we come with our integrity and with our form and structure. Anyway, it's helpful to me to hear that. Go ahead. I'll open up to you later. Let's do one more.
Kind of several people ask questions more or less on this topic. As young people, it is socially acceptable for us to walk away from the church. Therefore, those of us who are still here want the truth unadulterated. How can authentic tradition be promoted in the world today?
Yeah, okay, so along the same lines. And I know the walking away from the church thing. I mean, I've been studying this for a long time. The stats are not good, and you guys know that from your experience. Right now, the one that stays in my mind, for every one person that joins the Catholic Church, so think of RCIA programs and people coming in, for every one, 6 are leaving the Catholic Church. The army of what we call the nuns now, right, the N-O-N-E-S, those that say I have no religion, the numbers for Catholics under 30 right now, so people right in your age group, is 50%. One half of Catholics your age are now saying I have no religion. So that's a very serious issue. One that I want to bring to the Synod if I can is, and I think everyone knows it, we're facing a major crisis. So what do you do? There's the question. And what I'm hearing from a number of you and from the questions is one thing we don't do is water the project down. One thing we should not do is kind of cave into the culture and so on. So I get that. I get that. That's important, I think. Some people I know, with that statement that came out in March from the young people that gathered in Rome, they thought there was too much of that language of, you know, accommodation and we need to change this and that. And I know there are other voices. I'm hearing them today. They're saying, no, that's not the way to go. So I get that, and I do. I want to bring that to Rome. Please, go ahead. You want to follow up? Please.
Hello. I just wanted to address the idea that sometimes the people who do gather in Rome, the people who gather here, are the people you're preaching to the choir, right? We tend to be the people who would say, don't water down the teachings, don't make accommodations. We like it the way it is to some extent because we're here. So how do you address the idea of the people who aren't here are the people we're trying to bring back, but we're not getting their opinions in the room?
Yeah, and you're right about that. And what I do in my work, for example, Word on Fire, one thing I've liked about like YouTube, for example, is that it gets you totally outside the choir. I mean, believe me when I tell you, I hear all the time from young people that don't like the church and don't like what we teach. I mean, so I definitely hear that. And I'm happy to. You know, when I first started YouTube, this is years ago, and I did some videos, and I didn't know anything about YouTube. It just started. I didn't know you could comment on YouTube. So, man, did I find out. I mean, because, let's face it, 95% of people that write on your comment box, they're not saying, boy, Bishop, are you great? I really like what you... I mean, 95% are coming after you. So, I mean, I certainly know about that. The trick is now, how do you engage people like that? And my approach has been to accentuate the positive, as I say, to accentuate those elements within the culture that are resonant of the faith and that speak of it. So it might be some movie that, boy, I never saw any connection there, but oh yeah, there's actually an analogy with our Christology or our understanding of God or something. So that's what I've used with folks online. I'm not afraid to come back at people. In fact, I kind of like that when I get a really harsh response. And once you filter through the, personal kind of stuff, I say, okay, at least I got some traction now. Okay, you gave me an argument. Well, I'll argue back, And I've actually found, I wonder if you confirm this, that people your age like that. They like arguing about religion. And if we can, again, get beyond all the emotions and, name calling, let's really talk about this. And what I hear you saying is X, Y, and Z, and I think X and Y are okay, but Z isn't right. Then, all right, then they come back at me. And I like that. I like the give and take. So that's what I've tried to do to engage those who are outside. You guys are living in it. I mean, you know that. Your friends and your peers are those who are leaving the church in great numbers. I'd love to hear from you, too. How do you engage them? Go ahead.
I feel like the Catholic Church society views it as something that's, so judgmental. And like, as a young person, there's so many people who have different views and different beliefs. So walking into church is like, you automatically feel kind of like judged. And I feel like coming into my church, I did feel like that. But they were so open, and like, I feel if you just have like a more open church and like just understanding and actually like hearing people out, like obviously you don't have to agree with them, but just hearing people out, just making people feel comfortable is something that actually really helps people, because I feel like that's why people leave.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that's good, because we don't want to lead with judgment. Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't lead with judgment. Jesus calls to conversion, no question about that, but he tends to lead with that invitation. It's the woman at the well, it's Zacchaeus, the man born blind. Look at all the different stories. So that's good, that's helpful. If the church begins with judgment, the first word we hear is one of moral correction, that tends not to get a lot of traction with people, especially young people. Because, you know this, what's the number one value in our society? Is toleration, right? Don't be judgmental, is accept people as they are. Well, and as the church, I think we have to say yes and no to that. Yes, in a very fundamental way, as a child of God, as a beloved, adopted son or daughter of God, of course, everyone's welcome with love and so on. And then people are called to conversion, which always means there's going to be a no to something. We're all sinners in this room, so we all need to hear the word no as well. But I'm with you. I think beginning with judgment, if that's how people feel the church coming at them, that's not going to work. Go ahead, please.
So I guess thinking a little bit along that same line, something that would be wonderful also is a little bit more depth and clarity I know a lot of good friends, and myself included, we often found at the time of confirmation, we finished confirmation and then we had no idea where to go.
Yeah.
And we're entering that new stage in life and that new stage of depth where we're really seeking the truth. We want to know God's will for ourselves, particularly, but we're not getting instruction and we're too young to figure it out just on our own. Obviously there's some degree of self-discernment, but assistance in that is something that often seems lacking in parishes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. What are books to read? Who are people to talk to? What are communities to get involved in who are discussing some of these matters? I think maybe our parishes could be a lot better at doing that. And especially with that age group, the post-confirmation, pre-marriage, maybe, what do you do in where you guys are? What do you do with those years? And there are a lot of great resources. Because one thing about our time, when you guys all came of age after 9/11 and with the rise of the new atheism and all these critiques of religion, right? Well, as a answer to that, a lot of good resources emerged of apologetics and theology and spirituality and things online. Think of when I was a young person, you had to go to some little bookstore to find, now online you can find the whole Catholic world, So I'm with you. If parishes got better at giving us access, giving you guys access to that material, but also communities, like groups of people that could gather and share their faith, their questions, I mentioned Thomas Aquinas, my great hero. Thomas's whole approach is question, answer, isn't it? He doesn't just write a treatise with God. It's a question. And questions came from people like you. In the Middle Ages, he was teaching people your age, and they raised questions, and then he responded to them. So more of that, I think, would be great. Appreciate it. Go ahead, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. To lead by example and to just show that Catholicism isn't as culty as the culture makes it seem, and as scary and judgmental, and just show that we are the true church that Jesus started, and that we're just about love, and that people mess up, and that it makes Catholicism look bad.
Yeah.
But that's the own person's sin that messed up, and not the church. And to just kind of show that, and just really strive to just lead by example and not just throw words down people's throat, I think we'll get more people.
Yeah. The famous line from soon-to-be Saint Pope Paul VI, the people today need witnesses more than teachers. And if they listen to teachers, it's because the teacher is also a witness. And that's to your point, that if you're modeling what it means to be a Christian, that has far more impact. And it makes your words then far more credible that when you start to teach. So absolutely, who's witnessing this Christian thing? This very unique way of being in the world, which is called a Christian way of being. So I'm really with you on that. I love the fact, too, that you mentioned the cult thing, because the one thing Catholicism is not, at its most authentic, is a cult, which is like a little private group turned in around itself and little fussy practices. The church, from the beginning, even when there were a handful of people around the cross, the church was meant to be a universal, global reality that transcends the cultures, transcends the countries. We don't I'm not an American Catholic. I'd never, ever want to say that. To be a Catholic, kataholos, right, according to the whole, the universality, the arms of the Bernini colonnade in Rome that reach out to gather in the world. That's the opposite of a cult, right? We want to resist any cult-like quality. We're a universal religion. So that's helpful, that if we start looking like that, something's gone wrong, Good, please, go ahead.
I think young adults kind of live in a culture of isolation, and I think that emphasis of community is really important for even people to not be intimidated to come into church, but to come into that existing community where they're welcome and they have a place of both accountability but also vulnerability to help form each other in the faith and be able to kind of have something to fall back on when things are tough or when they are having questions about that faith, to emphasize that communal aspect of the church.
Yeah. A couple things came through my mind there. The one would be, you know, if a youth minister asked you guys, what would bring you in to an event at the parish? Because I know youth ministers from time immemorial always said, you know, we try this and we try that, and the young people don't come. Or we sponsor this, you know, the pizza and whatever, and the young people don't come. What would make you come to an event in a parish? What would you find really attractive? Go ahead, please. Got a mic coming if you want to. Huh?
What was attractive to me to come?
Yeah.
Was I saw who else was going.
Yeah.
I was looking at like other people who were going.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Go ahead.
And just basically affirming that every time I've been to a youth event where I just felt like this total worthwhile use of my time and I was happy to be there, there was a sense of joy among the people. And I think this goes back to the witness thing.
Yeah.
The youth leader and those involved had this sense of joy in being Christian that made it so attractive, where the youth events that were bad were kind of like, it's like quasi kind of, this is kind of like mass and it's good to go to, but no one actually wants to be here or something.
Yeah.
The sense of joy I got that made things really attractive.
And a certain clarion call to what it means to be a Catholic. And so I always associate that with the John Paul II sort of spirit. I had the privilege of being in Krakow for World Youth Day back in 2016. Anyone go to that? Curious. There were a number of people from LA, yeah. And to go to the church, St. Florian's, where young Karl Wojtyła was the parish priest. And he's founded youth groups, you know, and that's what he did with the kayaking trips and the hiking trips in the forest and all this, is he was drawing the young people into a very vibrant, joyful embrace of Catholicism, you know. And he was a very effective, we would say today, youth minister. So studying him and his method is kind of interesting. Should we get a couple more questions? How about that, Father Luke?
This is one that several people have asked, and it's very current. It has to do with the present situation of the church and scandals. And here's one. How can we encourage our friends and family to continue living out their faith in the church, within the church, in the midst of the scandal, especially those who do not yet have a solid relationship with Christ?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wrestle with it, you know. I think as all Catholics do. It's a tough time, you know. The 2002 period, so most of you were really young at that point if you were in existence at all. That was bad enough. And the church responded, you know, institutionally pretty well to make changes. And indeed, numbers of sex abuse among the clergy have really fallen off dramatically since those changes. And that's important to say. But then this recent business with Cardinal McCarrick has just reawakened all of this. And it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. It's undermines the work of the church in every way. I mean, I know that as an evangelizer. You're trying to blow some wind in the sail of the little sailboat of someone's faith, and then boom, this thing comes along. So I totally get that. I totally get the difficulty of it. And we are trying, now I'm a bishop, and we're trying to respond institutionally. I've called for a, you know, transparent, lay-led investigation to find out what happened in the McCarrick situation. I still think is a good thing to do as a first step. But here's the broader thing, though, everybody. We're not Catholics because of the moral integrity of our leaders. And that's an old issue. It goes back to St. Augustine, the so-called Donatist controversy back in his time. And the idea there was there were certain Catholics who had apostatized. They had left the faith during a time of persecution. Then they came back. And it's priests and bishops in some cases. And they came back. And the people said, hey, wait a minute. These people are compromised. I mean, they can't be celebrating the sacraments, and I don't want to receive communion at the hands of this, you know, loser. And Augustine made this great distinction between the moral quality of the minister and the objective nature of the sacraments, you know. But it's a very important distinction because we're not Catholics because we think all our leaders are saints. I wish they were. I wish I were a saint, you know. But we're not Catholics because of that. We're Catholics because of Jesus Christ risen from the dead. We're Catholics because of the Trinitarian God. We're Catholics because of the Mass. We're Catholics because of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist. We're Catholics because of the Blessed Mother. We're Catholics because of apostolic authority, right? That's why we're Catholics. And so it's awful, this time we're going through, and it undermines us in every way. And we have to respond to it institutionally. But in itself, it seems to me, that's not a good reason to say, I'm opting out, or I'm leaving the church, or I give up. I did a video a little while ago, and I just said, no, it's the time to fight. And I love this room is full of young warriors, which I love, you know. It's not the time to cut and run, it's the time to fight, and we fight for the church. And if that means some hard words have to be said and hard actions have to be performed, so be it. That's what war is like. But this is the moment to fight, and we need you guys in the front lines of that. The laity, you know, I buy the Vatican II vision. It's not a church that just belongs to the clergy. It belongs to the people of God, you know. And so you have a role to play in that? Absolutely. So don't run, fight, I would say. Understanding completely how awful this is and how it undermines the work we're trying to do. I'm sure it'll be a major theme at the Synod. It wasn't planned to be, you know, when we got this thing organized, but I'm sure it's going to be a major motif.
Thank you, Bishop Barron, for that testimony. Here's another question that several people have asked in similar ways. When should we engage with co-workers and friends in conversations about morality or things like that? I work at a secular community college where subjects like birth control, gay marriage, surrogate pregnancies come up frequently. Even I can tell you my boss is gay, and I'm not sure what to do. How can we engage them, and when is the time to do so?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, family members face that a lot. When do I engage or challenge or question or invite conversation with a family member who I think is in a bad space, either spiritually or morally? Yeah, I go back to something said earlier. I do think the witness thing probably should come first. Leading with moral correction rarely works very well. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying you bracket it completely. You don't. I think you get there. But I think beginning with your own witness, as you say, like to the joyfulness of the faith, your witness publicly as a Catholic. Let people see who you are. Wearing a sign of the faith on your person, sign of the cross in your place of work. Let them see, oh, that person's a Catholic. She's a Catholic, and boy, she seems joyful. You know this book by Sherry Waddell called Forming Intentional Disciples, I think it's called. She said the first step is always trust building. You know, before someone has trust, they're not going to listen to you. So if a coworker, you know, is doing something you know to be morally wrong, and you begin with moral correction, but the person doesn't really know you or trust you, almost 100% chance they're not going to listen to you. The first step is the establishment of trust. That, oh yeah, they know you, they like you, they understand you're a Catholic, so that it's coming out of some relationship. I think that's the key, you know, before you get to moral correction, probably the establishment of a real friendship and trust. And you get there. I'm not saying, oh, forget about all that morality business. No, I think you get there, but you get there carefully and with a real pastoral sensitivity. Otherwise, people just won't listen, likely, you know. Go ahead.
We as young adults were taught how to maybe engage in small groups at the parish. We're taught how to pray effectively and more fervently. Yeah. As young adults and even teens, though, we don't get a lot of instruction on how to evangelize the masses. And I'm not saying, like, do extravagant things, but just to even have a conversation with someone who may disagree. And I think that's really important for a parish.
No, that's good. And I think I'd like to bring that, this general concern to the Synod, because I think that's really right. Something I'm doing with Word on Fire now, you know, my media ministry, we're broadening it out really as a movement. And part of that movement is what we call the Word on Fire Institute. And its purpose is exactly what you said, is how to train lay people in evangelization. what is the good news? How do you share it? What are practical recommendations for evangelizing? Because I think you're right. A lot of people, they wouldn't know where to begin with that. But it's not going to happen from on high. I think evangelization happens from below. It happens people in workplaces and in families, and you know. So I'm with you on that. We're trying to search it through as well. But I think that's important to bring to Rome. You know. Good. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just in regards to that and a lot of the other things we were talking about.
Yeah.
The thing that really, like in regards to how relativist we want to be and how enculturated we want to be, it's the stats on like how much the mainstream Protestants and the Anglicans are hemorrhaging followers, but then the evangelicals and the Mormons are growing. So it's, or then people like Jordan Peterson that come out of nowhere and mass huge followings. Like,
yep.
Where do we find our route among all these different strategies, I guess?
Yeah, good. And I think we're trying to think it through, and those are good examples, because I think you can make a very persuasive case that those churches that really just completely accommodated themselves to the culture are not doing that well. I mean, if the strategy was, oh, this will really bring people in, it clearly hasn't worked. I think that's just non-debatable, you know. Peterson is interesting. You guys do listen to Jordan Peterson? Do you know who he is? He is an interesting phenomenon. You know, I'm coming to know what he's about, but the fact that he speaks, especially to young men, in kind of a direct, bracing, challenging way, that's part of his appeal, I think. And he's appealing, it seems to me, to the kind of Jungian psychology, the sort of archetypal psychology. A movie like Star Wars was filled with the Jungian archetypes. And that's to say things that are really fundamental in our psychological makeup. So I think that has an appeal to people. But especially that kind of bracing, challenging, you know, hey, here's what life's about and it's tough and here are 12 things you can do to make it better. And it obviously is appealing to millions of especially young people. So I get that. It's not a hand-wringing, like I'm not sure who I am and, you know, I hope you like me and I'm not really sure what I'm all about. That's not Peterson, and he's been pretty successful. So, yeah, I think there's something to learn there. Something to learn there. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. This question somewhat follows in line with the even previous question of why there are a lot of nuns and why haven't a lot of people that were raised culturally in the Catholic church still there. So like how do we even talk to and approach someone who's of a different denomination or a different religion on questions of morality? I too have noticed that a lot of non-denominational Christian churches have so much heavy turnout in their young adult gatherings, more so than the denominational Christian churches established Protestant ones.
The mainstream, yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like the Catholic Church has still a lot, and then it's the non-denominational. So the two ends of the spectrum have it. And it's maybe because they've tended to modernize the music that they do in their fellowship gatherings to get totally into it. Yeah, so it's not maybe so much that it's based in traditional stuff, but maybe it's adapted maybe to the times.
And that's a discussion we've been having for a long time, and what makes those churches appealing. I remember years ago I was at my home parish outside Chicago. And my sister, who's 3 years younger than I am, she said, everyone's leaving St. John's, our church, to go to, and she named the local kind of Congregationalist church that was real into the, and it was the music and it was fellowship and it was real welcoming. She said, they don't make any moral demands and they just say everyone's welcome. And so it's the dark and the light side of it, that the music and come on in and everyone's welcome is a good thing. It is a good thing. But then I said, well, yeah, but what about the Eucharist and the sacraments and a call to conversion is part of the picture too. Now, how do you relate those two to each other? How much welcome and how much challenge? But I think that's we have been thinking about it for a long time, what makes a lot of the megachurch places appealing to young people? And you've named some of it. I think the fellowship and the music is a big part of it. You know this guy Rick Warren out here in Southern California, right? One of the great mega church founders. It's very interesting because he said, you know, they have their Wednesday service, which is the, hey, everyone's welcome, and hey, call me Rick, and everyone come on in. But then once people are in, they don't stop there. Then they start making serious demands on people in terms of discipleship, in terms of training, and then in terms of mission. That once they're trained, then they're going to be sent out as missionaries. And if you're not willing to cooperate, he said, you don't come to the classes and all that, you're out. So in a way, sometimes we can see just the, come on everybody in, you're welcome side of it, but we don't see the demand side of it as well. So anyway, I thought that was sort of interesting. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Please. How are we doing on time? We're okay? Okay. Please.
While I see that these initiatives are good for community, especially in, like you said, an isolated culture, which is not good, it seems like sometimes the emphasis can be too much on these groups, and that to me seems a little bit more like a club. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I would be Catholic even if I were the only person on earth. I don't go to the church so that I can have a club. I love that I can see people in my parish that I love saying hi to them, but I don't think the main focus should be on these initiatives to kind of have these, I don't know, have these groups, have these gatherings, because sometimes you said what makes those appealing, and sometimes I'm thinking, well, I don't go to the church for a club. If it's something like teaching, maybe JP2's Theology of the Body, then I'm attracted to it, but I'm not attracted to a sort of like a rock music hangout in the church basement. That seems at odds to me. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I feel like those groups that are successful, you know, no judgment, no moral judgment, yeah, just kind of come and have fun. That to me is a club. The Unitarians, that's a club. You know, you don't go there to get guidance for how you live when you go home, and those questions of why do we exist. You know, you don't get the answers there. So, well, I would say that yes, I like people reaching out and being kind and forming friendships. I don't know that should necessarily be the main emphasis of like the LA Archdiocese right now. I think it should be more, what do these people need to live and make it through this earthly pilgrimage?
Yeah.
Just as, sorry, maybe a little corollary to that, because that's pretty much the point I wanted to make. But not only is it a question about what's attractive to people, you know, bringing them into the faith, but there's another reality for me, which is that I feel like most of the time I'm fighting harder in the church than I am outside of the church. I feel like getting to the sacraments and to confession is like a constant battle. I consistently have to argue about, I feel like I have to argue about basic catechism in my confessions. And it just seems like I see as a young person kind of like this widespread, it's almost like a crisis of faith and understanding of the sacraments. Yeah. And for me, I mean, I take it very seriously. You know, this is about Christ. My whole life. And I just so frequently feel like it's so hard in the church to be taken seriously for that, even from priests oftentimes. And I guess that's the point I wanted to make, and maybe a question in the spirit of like staying in the church and fighting. How do we deal with that? I mean, yeah, I mean, where do we go? Who do we talk to? Or you know, it's one thing to evangelize and talk to other people, but when I have such a hard time staying close to the sacraments myself because of this the struggle that's within the church, what do I do with that? Yeah,
that's a big issue you're raising. I mean, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a big issue you're raising, and I regret that. I regret to hear that there'd be that kind of struggle. Even as you're seeking confession or maybe in the confessional feeling like I'm at odds with my confessor over basic doctrine, I guess my first response is seek out a better confessor, you know, find someone. I know, and you shouldn't have to be in that position. I understand that. You shouldn't have to be looking all around, but find a good confessor, you know, and if I think it's okay to raise a concern with a priest. If you feel that a priest is not, you know, legitimately teaching what the church teaches, to first raise it with him. If no progress is made there, to raise it with his superior. I think that's okay. But for you personally to find a good confessor, that is with the program, I think that's okay. Now, again, I don't know the particulars of your situation. I don't know what the priest is saying. Is there a legitimate challenge in there somewhere? Is he legitimately maybe cautioning something? I don't know. I don't know what's going on personally, but I think do the best you can to find a good confessor. But it's too bad that you'd have to face that challenge.
Bishop?
Go ahead.
We're over time.
Okay.
We're so thankful. I don't know if there is any final words that you would like to say to people. Clearly, and I hope that all of us make a promise that we're going to be praying like crazy for you as you go to Rome. We'll be praying for the Holy Spirit to enlighten you and all the people there. Do I have that promise? Do we have it? Good.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really mean that. That means the world to me. I don't know what it's going to be like. It's obviously my first synod. Other people who've been to synod say they're kind of boring. I think it's about 300 people in this room, and you listen to speeches for much of it. So it's a little. But I think when you're in the small groups, there's a chance to do what we just did. And believe me, that's what bishops do. I mean, we'll be around the table, trust me, raising these very same issues and trying to think them through. And I'm delighted to be able to bring what you raised today. Really happy, A, that you came, B, the energy in the room. I didn't want it to be just, I'm responding blah, blah, blah to questions. And it wasn't that. I was delighted to hear from you guys. So thank you, gosh, for that. And I promise that. You promised prayers for me. I promise to bring what you've said today around those tables. And we'll see what happens. I mean, finally, it's the Pope's call, but I think we do present this document at the end of the synod. And I'll make sure that, at least as much as I can, I don't have any great clout, but that your perspective is heard. So really, really grateful for that. Was there?
So I just want to make one comment. I think in hearing everybody here, there's two issues at play. One is how do we bring in people to the church, and the other is how do we keep young people.
Yeah.
How the Catholic Church is different from all other Christian churches is the Eucharist, is the Mass, is the liturgy.
Yeah.
I feel like we have been trying to bring people in who don't maybe believe in the Eucharist by changing the Eucharist into what they believe.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to have youth ministries and these clubs and all these things within parishes, but that needs to stand independent and separate from the Eucharist. The Eucharist is for everybody, young, old, and it's something that has to revitalize us. It's grace is what we need in order to go out and evangelize and bring in those young people. So I think, just making sure that we can set the parishes and the bishops separate those two things. There's a place for worship, for God, for not really trying to bring people in. The Mass is about God. It's about the Eucharist, about us praying to Him. When the Mass is done, and after we receive the sacraments, be energized to then go out and bring in the people to that beautiful sacrament. So not changing the sacrament, if anything, actually making it more the same throughout the parishes. I'm talking to my wife about maybe going to another parish that's not mine because I'm not getting that fulfillment of grace through the Mass because of it's a concert behind the sacrament, or because the Eucharistic ministers don't really realize what they have in their hands. There's people that just walk to their church like it was a hall. There's two different things, and I think, the way to bring people in is not through judgment, I get it, but also by showing them the truth. And the truth lies in the Eucharist. And at the end of the day, Christ says it's not an easy way to heaven. And it's our job to show what that narrow path is so that the most people can go through it. But if we try to make that path way too wide and not really focus it on what the truth is, the Eucharist, then that path will lead you to nowhere. And so I kind of would like, I don't know if people agree, I was just listening on people feeling like they feel judged when they go into the church, while others say that they don't get enough out of it. I feel like we don't, within the Catholic Church, we need to realize that the Eucharist is what we use to get our grace, and then after that, that's the starting point. Kind of like confirmation is not the goodbye sacrament. Yeah. The Mass is not the goodbye sacrament until the following Sunday. It should be what makes us go out and bring people into the church. And then those clubs, the youth ministries, could have, sorry, Father Luke, one more second. Those clubs could have different approaches. Some of them could be more on music and bands. The other ones could be in apologetics. The other ones could be in whatever. But the Mass and the Eucharist is what should bring all those different opinions together and focused on Christ.
And I'll just say one quick thing. I'll say one quick thing in response to that is the focus on those who come to Mass and get it, understand it, then being sent out as missionaries. Because think of the army of nuns now who they're not going to come anywhere near the Mass. I mean, the Mass is just, I gave up on that, or I don't know what it is. But those like you who do come to Mass and do get it, now the minute you exit the church, you're in mission territory, right? You don't have to go across the ocean to get to mission territory. You're in it right now when you exit the church. So everyone that's received the Eucharist, now you go as an evangelizer, as a missionary. What if every single person that came to Mass said, this coming year I'm bringing 3 new people in, and it's my responsibility. There's Vatican II, you know. So I'm with you there. I mean, I think the Eucharist, it's not like the be-all and end-all answer, because the nuns aren't going to come to the Eucharist. We got to go get them and bring them. But those like you that get it, you're the missionary. Go, you know.
I think on that note, we
note,
have Mass right now,
yeah,
and so we can
that's a good note.
live it ourselves.
Good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very
God
much.
bless all you guys. So stay for Mass. Thanks. Good being with you. Thanks.